Good morning, good afternoon.
Hello, hi, Dory. How are you?
Fantastic. Where are you on the planet, Maki?
The UAE, United Arab Emirates, Abu Dhabi, calling from
Awesome.
Abu Dhabi. What about you?
I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia.
That's great.
Wonder if anyone else is joining today.
Yeah, maybe we'll give it a few minutes.
Yeah, yeah, let's give it a couple minutes. I know Drummond had hoped to, I know he's traveling as well, because there is one issue that was raised that it's substantive in that it's a naming and wording change that's important. But I wanted to get, I think I've understood. He and I have not had a chance to meet. We planned as of last week to visit on it. It just we were overtaken by events. We had other things we had to handle when we had time together.
Yeah, I actually missed last week's as well. So, so yeah, hopefully, he joins us and, we proceed with those updates.
Yeah. But I didn't have time to actually create the minutes. I'm going to do that while we're running here. Hey, Mitch, how you doing?
Hey,
I'm
I'm well.
I find the new GitHub or new Confluence painful. Brutal to find things now, but I think I'm finding it. Trust Registry Task Force meeting schedule.
Yeah, I think the
Meeting
GitHub
page.
is pretty straightforward. Confluence is a bit hectic.
Yeah, they used to have a tree on the side that was, well, maybe I'm just being a dork and there's the tree. Okay, it collapses. Yeah, okay. I need more coffee, folks. Okay, so let me make a copy because really there's not a lot to cover, but I had hoped we would be able to say, let's go to public review, but we won't be able to today. Just that there's a substantive issue at play, but it might be good to have a discussion on it. If I could just pick your brains and see where you gents fit. So I'm just about to create the minutes here. 10:09. Is it Maki or Mackie?
Maki, yes, yes.
Mackie? Okay. Sorry about that. Mitch, I don't see you on Confluence.
I thought I created that last week. Let me double check.
I thought we had this. Yeah, I'm having
Yeah.
flashbacks, my friend.
Hi, Scott. Hi, Alex.
The man from Kenya.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Awesome. Good. We actually have, we went through some, we're just, I didn't get a chance to get the minutes ready. We're just cleaning that up. There's really two issues to go through. I'm going to put this one issue in here. Wow, that's really big font.
I think I should be there now. I just had to click a yes.
Cool. Let's see, both issues are here. Okay. So I'll just kick things off. I don't know if Drum's gonna be able to make it. He's on the road, and or is absolutely pinned with his agentic AI work that he's doing now, which is also one of the reasons why I've raised at the bottom of the calendar a standing comment that we're open for chairs. Especially, it would be great to have an APAC side chair. Because the time zones, especially this time of year, are pretty rough. But let's get things kicked off. Just remember, this is a Trust over IP meeting. If you are not a member of Trust over IP, please keep yourself to an observer role. We are following the Linux Foundation antitrust policy, as well as the policies you see here. We went through last week. Just last week was really a large scale review of old tickets, some newer tickets, and we closed off a ton. Let me just pull up for an example. Last week, when I looked at the issues list, we had something like 16 or 18 of them. We're now down to just a few, which really are a few things that need to just be closed off. Which I believe the scopes and recognition is already one that we just have to close off with Andres. We'll discuss the claim ID. TRQL references, this little one here, just pointing out that we were pointing at TRQL in the spec, but that spec doesn't exist. So for a normative spec to point at a spec that's new being developed, it doesn't make sense. But we still have some trailing words like ABNF is defined, but never used. So there's a tiny bit of, this is a cleanup editorial thing. But I wanted to discuss an issue that came up, and Drummond raised it last week, and we'll get to the claim ID in next, Alex, if you don't mind. Which is this. Let me jump to the ticket itself. Oh, there we go. I love the new Confluence. So Drummond and I, we closed off last meeting indicating Drummond and I would find some time to visit and discuss his concerns on sections 5 versus section 7. That meeting did not happen. But I do believe I've found the problem, and it frankly makes me kind of happy that we have the problem, because I think I'm a very weird, I've never been comfortable with some of the abstractions we've had. And I think Drummond has just pointed out kind of the abstractions or if you a flaw, if you will. And then just pull up, I'm going to pull up another screen. And sorry for jumping around here, folks. How am I going to do this? Okay, I've got the summary here. The issue that Drummond raised is that if we look at section 5, and I will put that here just so we can, in case you're following along, we have ecosystem IDs, trust registry IDs, authority IDs, and entity IDs. Drummond points out that there's an inconsistency between these and what we do here. And as I've gone through it, has anybody else looked at this problem? Let me describe the problem. When we go back to the beginnings of Trust Registry Task Force, the question or the statement we were making, we've learned from this, we need more. We need to be able to reference other trust registries. That's there as well. But this fundamental question of, does entity X have authorization Y? And we used to say, under Ecosystem Governance Framework Z. We have over time compressed, and I'm using that word compressed particularly into a couple of variants. Does entity X have authorization Y under EGF-Z? That's how we've written it. Where again, that's Ecosystem Governance Framework Z. That then became, does entity X have authorization Y under Ecosystem Z? And I think we started to lose information. This is all the way back to the Claude Shannon information theory, that compression is lossy. Because if you look at some of the ecosystems we're working with, some of them, an ecosystem will have a controlling ecosystem governance framework. But they will point at other things that are out there that they are also conformant with. And if your question is in the context of one of the things they're pointing at, it may be a better question to ask back to, it's the actual ecosystem that I care about in the context. I mean, I'm asking, and it's a couple examples. And both of these are just working examples, meaning they're both being built out, so they're not fully operating. But the first person network has its own ecosystem governance framework. It's called the First Person Network Governance Framework. The IRA Trust Network has the IRA Trust Network Governance Framework. Those are separate, but they're not. The First Person Network depends on and builds on top of the IRA Trust Network Governance Framework. So these are layered governance frameworks. if I'm coming from the outside world, outside of the first person network, and want to ask a question, do you have the authority, or do you have the authority to issue um, something that's managed at the IRA trust network level? I don't want to ask the trust registry of the first person network. I don't want to ask the question in the context of the first person network governance framework. I want to actually ask in the terms of a governance framework. I've got that documented here, but I think that gets too confusing, but I'm not sure, and I want to throw a couple thoughts at you. If I'm asking that question in the context of what governance framework am I caring about, because that may be the actual only thing I care about is the governance framework. The fact that you're an ecosystem, beautiful, but there's a whole bunch of ecosystems that may conform with that governance framework. Because of the way that we have the ability at trust over IP, and it's one of our pillars is governance frameworks. We have the ability to extend. We have the ability to take a governance framework and extend it. But when you come down to the simplest thing, really, I'm asking the ecosystem. But an ecosystem is a generic term. Mr. Tweedale.
Yeah, this is something that I also grappled with when we implemented our trust registry implementation and tried to tie it as closely as possible to like this original question. I think I agree that it's you're
Sorry,
querying
Alex.
the
Paul, when you say original question, do you mean
oh
this
yes,
or
the ecosystem governance framework, the one that
okay?
includes
Yep.
ecosystem governance framework.
Cool. Thank you.
Because often a governance framework is like a human readable document, right?
Yep.
So it doesn't always have like, it doesn't necessarily define scopes of authorizations, whereas an ecosystem itself might. So when
Yep.
we implemented this, the actual query is against like a machine readable
Yep.
ecosystem scope.
Yep.
And then we also can return the human readable governance framework as part of the response, but the query isn't
Yep.
actually against the governance framework
Yep.
itself.
Yep. Yeah. It's and then I love that thinking. Can I throw a? I thought yeah. Okay. What you're pointing out is it's the concrete thing. We use the term elsewhere in the spec of controlling and a controlling party. So to your point, as if I interpret it correctly, Alex, let me know if I got this right. An ecosystem governance framework, it is a governance document, if you will, but it is
Yeah.
implemented by the controlling authority. And we need to check on the terms, and we have Scott Perry here who can probably correct me if I got the wrong term. That's who I'm asking the question of. When I say who, I mean it's literally, in this case, it's a system that has concretely surfaced the governance, the answers that are governed by the government. If there's a mistake between the technical thing I'm talking to and the governance framework, it's their fault. It's not. It's the answer is the technical piece. I'm kind of rambling. So let me ask you this, Alex. Is what you're saying, what I'm hearing you say, it is the ecosystem I'm asking, not necessarily the governance framework that I'm asking.
Yeah, I can
Okay.
show you an example if that would help as well.
Yeah,
I don't want to take too much time, but I have quite an easy way of showing it, which could be valuable
please
for
do.
those in the call.
This would be awesomely helpful.
So we recently st created a UI for our trust registries. I
Awesome.
checked,
This is
and
where, how much did you just, sorry, how much did you learn when you did this?
oh, so much. Like
Love it.
we had APIs under the hood,
Hmm.
and then so much had to change when
Yeah.
we started building a UI because like we were like, oh, these user flows don't actually work. Like this, we
This
need
is
to.
slick.
So basically, when we create a new ecosystem, you can set the name. So let's call this like IRA Trust Framework.
Yep.
You select a DID. So I don't know, let's just assume that we've created an
Yep.
IRA DID already. Let's just use this one or
Yep.
one with a name.
Perfect.
And then we have the ability
Yep.
to add a
Yep.
governance framework URL.
Perfect.
But what the actual meat of this ecosystem is what we have unchecked is like what schemas are
Yep.
authorized under this ecosystem.
Yep.
So I can add like, I don't know, schema.org/person, call it type person.
Yep.
right? And then this could be IRA. I don't know. Let me actually find the IRA governance framework. Just do it this really quickly.
Just use governance.ira.form.
Oh yeah. Okay. Governance dot IRA dot for governance. What is it?
.ira.
Dot IRA dot for
Yep.
dot forum. Beautiful. So, okay, let me create this ecosystem. So, and this is actually creating an ecosystem on our ledger at the
Yep.
moment,
Yeah. So it's
on our
anchoring now to
testnet.
checked. Awesome.
Yeah, this is anchoring down to checked. So, okay, now we go into the ecosystem, IRA Trust Framework,
Mm-hmm.
and we can add members to the ecosystem. So let's take a DID that I've already created. Let's take Amazon. This
Yep.
example DID. Um, oh, and then let's add it to the framework, to the
Yep.
ecosystem. And let's grant it authorization to this schema.org/person. And let's say this is an issuer in this ecosystem. Now, let me save this. Now, when we query this Amazon did, or the scopes of Amazon did, we're basically saying, does Amazon hold an accreditation from the IRA Trust framework?
Yep. Yep.
But we're not actually asking anything about the governance framework. So when we,
Yep.
so if I was to query this, the response format that we have would basically be something like this, where it's like, is this did authorized? Yes, true. And we're going to update this to be TRQP compliant, but it's like this would be the root of
Yep.
trust. This is just hypothetical. And then
Yep.
it returns the governance framework. So this would be
Yep.
governance.ira, governance.ira.forum, but it doesn't have any query against the governance framework. It's just is
Right.
this
It's there for
entity
you to.
authorized? Yeah,
It's there for me if I receive that to go, oh, hey, I'll go further, but that's up to me.
exactly.
Yep.
So
Perfect.
yeah, I think that's a really nice, like, as I was implementing this, I thought about, okay, it's not the governance framework that we are questioning in terms of authorization. It's the scopes that the ecosystem have created. And that could be schemas, it could be custom permissions, it could be any arbitrary scope, but it's not necessarily the governance framework. The governance
Yeah.
framework could be a machine readable set of scopes, but it isn't
Yeah.
always.
Right. This, I mean, certainly for me, this is really helpful. It also, by the way, covers off our claim ID discussion is partially, um, because you just showed me it in concrete form. So let me just jump back to my screen if you don't mind. Oh, I see a chat. What's going on in the chat? Governing authority. Thank you. Yes, actually, let me make a note of that. Scott pointed out the term is not controlling party, it's governing authority. I'm going to make sure we talk about that in just a second because that's important here. Share, spec inconsistency. Okay. So there's a couple other things that are at play. Like here's where my discomfort has been for some time is I think you've probably heard me use the word abstract. Authority ID to me is quite abstract. But I can understand why we're using it because you're trying to use the same structure in two different ways. Checking for authorization, checking for recognition. I get it. But I think when I read through this document here, this is back to the spec itself. I think this trust registry ID thing is where we went kind of crooked. When I say crooked, we went off piste a little bit and got into a bit of trouble. I'm a skier. That's when I get into trouble. The fact that a trust registry may have, here's part of the discussions that have happened, a trust registry may host multiple ecosystems. The fact that there's a multi-tenant system, that's nice. In the context of TRQP, I really don't, I mean, I care, just not that much. You're going to have a web server that's serving up the HTTP data. I care, just not that much. The fact that someone has got multiple ecosystems in their trust registry is immaterial to the question. I'm asking a question of the authority of the governing authority effectively by talking to the endpoint that they have given me, and it's in the context of an ecosystem. We can argue the ecosystem in the context of governance framework. I think ecosystem is where we're probably going to land. But it's not a trust registry. I'm talking to a trust registry, but that's the thing that's doing the job of surfacing in a concrete way the answer that goes through the governing authority, goes through the governance framework, gives me the technical answer, like you just saw with Alex just showed with checked. So to me, the answer becomes in the spec itself. I think that this is the problem. We've put trust registry ID became a first-class citizen when it's not. It's there to serve a purpose. It serves up the information, but it is not the information. So I think if we back away from this and instead of saying right now, because right now, sorry, I just realized our question right now. I'm just going to copy this here. Because the question we ask right now is it's under authority ID. And much like, and the reason I really loved your answer, by the way, Alex, of what did you learn when you went to the graphic side? So at IRA, we're doing the IRA cards work of wiring up the trust registry query protocol, and literally everybody who's touched this so far has said, what do I use for authority ID? It's like, really? Okay, awesome. It's quite comical that when we get into the using abstract terms, which are powerful, that the implementers are like, they literally don't know what the answer is. I had to do some thinking on it. I would propose that we get back to, maybe not get back to, that this is the actual question that this. I think, Alex, this is in line with your thinking. And what I like is I really do believe there's an ecosystem governance framework filter or query that goes deeper, but we have TRQ off of that. We have Turkle for that. We can do that later. What do you folks think is this is the main question? Do you agree with this? And Scott, is this making sense to you? I noticed you just went off mute.
Okay, so the two, I think you're overcomplicating it. You know, since I am operating the trust registry,
Yep.
there's two things, okay, that need to get clearly defined, and apparently it's getting all mixed up. One is the relationship between a governing authority and its participants. Okay, that's the inner circle. Okay, that's what I'm doing. You know, people pass,
Yep.
you know, organizations, whatever, they pass compliance, and we
Yep.
put a record out which says, yep, the governing authority, and I'm acting as administrator for the administrator tied to the governing authority. So I'm acting as that. And we give them, and they're trusted, they're past
Good.
conformance, whatever that is.
Perfect.
So we need to have, you know, and I think we spent quite a bit of time to get that, and that deals with, does entity X, which is within the ecosystem, entity X have authority under ecosystem Z, right?
Yep.
Correct. You know, they're conformant. They have rights associated with it. Then you have a separate set of, you know, of records, which is the negotiation that trust registries have with other trust registries that want to rely on it.
Yep.
So, and I can see that, and I see Will hand is Will.
Can you state that again?
Here, huh?
Can you state that again? The last one.
So that is, it's the relationship with the trust registry and other relying trust registries.
Yep.
Okay.
Hey, Scott.
And so let's say, you know, this our trust registry is living and breathing.
Yep.
And there's another, maybe IRA. Let's just talk IRA. So IRA wants to be able to, in one fell swoop, trust the C2PA trust registry.
Yep.
So they engage in a conversation and an agreement, or whatever they do off band, And they said, okay, we're going to add IRA because it's one way. It's actually one-way trust in this case. You can have two ways, but I think we need to have individual transactions for each way. So
Yep.
let's just talk about the one way. So
It's a dual
you need to have
simplex. Yep.
right. We need to have a transaction that says IRA trusts C2PA.
Yep.
And that's it. Because if the protocol works, then you deal, what.
Yep.
So IRA just points to the C2PA and then the inside trust takes over.
Yep.
Right. And you got to do that handoff. So the pure transaction is one ecosystem trusting another ecosystem. And if we don't have that in our protocol, then we're failing.
Well, so just for clarity, we do have it. For non-clarity, we're using the term authority ID, which is what you have said repeatedly in your words were ecosystem, ecosystem, ecosystem. You didn't say, does IRA trust C2PA governance framework? Right? The question is ecosystem the best term?
I'd say they're trusting the trust registry.
See,
So,
they're trusting.
because
Let me rephrase that, Scott. And this is critical. IRA would be trusting the C2PA system of record.
yes.
It's getting its answer via the trust registry query protocol.
Right.
Because all the query protocol does is query. It doesn't define what your system is, but it's asking. And legally speaking, it's the ecosystem I'm trusting. It's not the trust registry. It's manifested through the trust registry.
That's the rub, and I
Right.
disagree with that. Okay, we're dealing with a protocol here, right?
Right. But we're dealing with a protocol, but I'm always asking in the context of an ecosystem. If you decide to mirror or duplicate your information and have multiple places, I could be talking to multiple, use a DNS analogy. I can get an answer from any number of DNS servers. Fundamentally, at the end of it, it's the owner of that DNS entry that is really the authority. DNS is just replicating the data. And over time, that will be true of the protocol as well.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I think I think this is the problem that this protocol so far has been dealing with. If you're dealing with protocol, you have to deal with machine communication. Okay.
Yeah.
So I talked about an off-band negotiation where IRA maybe in their governance framework, they have a process to evaluate and determine whether it's going to trust another ecosystem, right?
Yep.
And it has a method to do that. It goes in, let's say IRA wants to trust C2PA. So then they have a governance framework that says they're going to do a review of the framework and the conformance program and do whatever they need to do to trust it.
Yep.
Okay, that's off band, not in a protocol.
Yep.
And once they reach that point, then they're talking to the C2PA and they know that the trust registry is an indication of entities that have gone through the program. So after they've done their due diligence, they decide to trust the trust registry. And we need a protocol in order to do that. Now, if it's not as clean as that, that's what the problem is. Because now you're relying on a governance frame, you're trying to put protocol and transactions to a governance framework, which is a bunch of words. A trust registry is machine readable. Protocols need to be machine readable.
Yep.
Yeah.
So why aren't we just, and that's the way trust registries work today. I mean, I don't have to nobody reviews Microsoft's trust root program in order to rely upon it. They just get the list, they do that review separately and then make a decision to rely upon the Microsoft root program and the fact that they have, you know, the list of roots in every computer. And then the focus is really that interaction with the trust registry. The protocol is focused on the trust registry. It's not on looking at the trust root program and whether it's reliable or not. They reach a decision outside of the protocol to trust it. And once they trust it, they enact the statements needed to create that trust.
Mhm.
And that's I believe that's, you know, and I'm, you know, in the ecosystem I'm working with and working with Will and such, we're looking at industries creating trust lists. Where matter of fact, that's the conversation I'm currently having at the Creator Assertions Working Group, is we're going to put that in the spec of how we create a reliance upon a trust registry and trust registries that are developed by industry. And we're creating and we're adding it to the protocol of you know, the C2PA ecosystem. Okay.
Right.
So I need this group. If this group is going to take over that process, it has to be as clean as that. Because right now, I'm moving forward and we've created our own protocol and a reliance
Yep.
outside
to-
of this, outside
totally
of this
agree.
group.
So this is a diagram I think you helped work on, right?
Yeah,
Are you seeing my diagram?
I am.
Cool. So the question at hand really is, what's the fundamental thing I'm asking about? I am talking to a trust registry. When I ask the question, I am literally talking to the trust registry at the time. Am I asking literally, hey, you, I'm talking to you, it's always in your context? Or am I asking about the ecosystem itself?
I may be asking both. I may, I need to be able to access the trust registry for two different reasons. If I'm asking a query about an entity that's within the trust registry, like if I'm a validator product and
Yep.
I want to know if the certificate signed by a generator
Are they authorized
product,
to do that thing? Yep.
right? Are
Yep.
they on the trust list? It's
Yep.
basically what it is. That's all. I mean, there's two lists that are going. They're going to a CA list and they're going to a conformance product
Yep.
list. So that's within the trust registry, query. Okay, is this entity within your
So this is
it on the trust registry? That's a question I need to. Is entity X on the trust registry?
So this is we have only two queries right now, Scott. One's authorization, which does exactly that. It says,
okay.
this is sorry.
Right. Well, I think we got that nailed. I think the problems that are existing is adding the statements or protocol around IRA trusting the C2PA trust registry.
Which is the recognition. We have that too, Scott. Literally the question is, when I ask the endpoint, do I tell it trust registry ID or ecosystem ID? That's it. That's the only question at hand right now. Because trust registry ID, and this might be part of just the rabbit hole I mentioned we went off piste. A trust registry may host multiple ecosystems, which means it's ambiguous. But I really don't care. If you tell me your trust registry endpoint is X, I'm going to hit X and ask it the damn question.
You made an assumption. You say trust registries are going to represent multiple ecosystems.
This was a discussion that went,
so I could figure that
out. This was an off-piste discussion. I don't think it was helpful, but it ended up sending us down a rabbit hole
Right,
few
let's
months
say
back.
no initially, and let's, if
Yep.
a circumstance that's in the minds of, of architects that don't live in the real world, let's
Well, but
deal with
actually, the
that when it happens.
architects who live in the real world would still give you a different endpoint. It's a multi-tenant system. They'd give you an endpoint that disambiguates it anyways. So if
So to
trust registry
me,
equals ecosystem ID, we have an answer. It's just a naming thing.
right, so
Okay.
we have two in CTPA, we have three trust registries, actually, three separate ones. We have a timestamp authority, we have a CA, and we have a conforming products list. Three trust registries. They have lists of either CA, certificates, or TSA certificates, or we have product
What's a
records.
TSA?
Timestamp authority.
And what was the okay? Timestamp authority.
CA, timestamp, CA, timestamp, and
Okay,
conforming
CA, okay.
products list.
Okay.
Okay. I can even pop it up if you want. Okay, because we have them, they are all public,
Yep.
have to be public, right?
So you'll note I'm using a term. I'm using 3 registries or systems of record. So you could easily, concretely serve up what we call assertion ID of TSA, CA, and conforming.
Now, assertion ID is what?
When I ask the question, does entity X have authorization Y under authority ID? It's the string that gets built here to answer to this is what I'm asking you about. So
Okay,
it might actually look like C2PA V1 timestamp authority. Your ecosystem gets to define what the string is that you tell me. You hit my trust registry, ask me about that question, we're good to go, we're done. You define this right now.
well, as opposed to doing that, why don't I show you what's in these trust registries, and you tell and you figure out what additional statements need to be
Yeah.
added to these trust registries to
Actually,
fit
I
into your
would
program.
I would say I'd be happy to do that, and I doubt you would need to add anything. You should not need to add anything given what you've described. It's literally you're going to tell the outside world if you want to find out about a C2PA timestamp authority, pass us this thing, pass us its entity ID, we'll give you the answer.
I'm questioning that. Where, because somehow, somewhere, we're writing a protocol here. Where are we making these statements? Where would these statements
This is
be?
where, yeah, this is where we are specifically taking, if you take a look at the layered approach of the analogy we keep using is TCP/IP. We're working on the protocol that simply says, here's the question I'm asking. Where you get your inputs, I really don't care. You're sending data through the protocol. We've quickly identified that every ecosystem needs to be able to answer the questions you're asking right now. So we're doing that right now at IRA with a bunch of our members to say, what are the actual assertion ID values that we're going to use? What's the namespacing or approach we're going to use? We've purposely said it's a string because otherwise we're building a whole namespacing thing. This would be a 20-minute exercise by looking at your system to say, tell the outside world this. We're also using what we call a profile at IRA to say, and here's where you get the answers to say, hey, ask our registry what assertions you can ask about. What are the authority strings that are available in this ecosystem? You could do that too easily. But it goes beyond where
Well,
the protocol
okay,
is. It's a
I
layer.
want to go back. I want to go back to the question I had before, and I think it would be very helpful to get an answer on this, which is, what statements would you state today if IRA wanted to rely upon the C2PA 3 trust registries? Okay. So I can show you where they are. I can show you how their URLs, and I can even open them up and say, this is the contents of these. So,
And I'd be happy to do that. We don't need 6 people working on the protocol to do that. But that's my first approximation right there.
well, but it's not that difficult to do. So, I mean, I've been
We have another issue to go through though. We have
Right,
limited,
but-
yeah.
I hear you. And this thing, this trust query protocol process has been going on for I don't know how long. And even while the program, so the thing was, the C2PA launched while this whole thing was happening.
Yep.
And this is how it's happening, and this is how it's going to work for the C2PA. So if this protocol can't accommodate
Here's what
something that's
Scott,
out in the marketplace that's fresh and new,
Scott, it
then-
can.
okay.
Working through it as a group of 6 people who have another issue to deal with today is not the way to do it. I'm happy to meet with you later today. Hammer
No,
through
I get
it.
it.
Show
I don't
people
wanna-
a PDF.
I don't
You
want to
know what I mean?
derail your whole conversation, but if you can't do that, that's the other, But if
Scott,
you're saying it can, and the issue that you're raising right now has nothing to do with that, then I'll stand down here.
what the issue we agreed as a task force before, that there are implementation guidance that's absolutely critical to using the protocol, right? If I write the TCP/IP protocol, I still have to get a guidance on how do I put my data through there if it's different. We have that, and we can use you as a perfect exemplar of this is how we can use the Trust Query Protocol with C2PA. Here's the key information you're going to need. You're going to need to know what are the assertion IDs? What do they mean? So the outside world, oh, great, perfect. I can find out if that person's an actual C2PA timestamp authority. Awesome. But we can do that out of band, and that's the intent. The protocol is not the implementation guidance. We need to separate those two. And that's one of the things we've agreed to months back. But I'd love to do that as a concrete example with you.
Okay. Well, you made one statement. You said everything is based on TCP/IP,
No,
and I would challenge that actually.
no, it's not based on, it's similar to.
Okay, I would say that it should be, that it should be from the IRA, depending on the C2PA. I
Totally.
would say that's a federated process.
Yeah,
And
it's
it
a
should be
lower
more like a
lowercase
federated
yeah,
stack.
it's a federation decision in a Drum would call it in a hierarchy, right? We're not hierarchical, we're peers.
Fair enough.
Yep,
Right.
totally agree. The difference being the protocol is there to bridge between the systems of record that are yours, and we have no business in messing with your systems of record. You're the one maintaining it, doing all the stuff, right? And then the outside, the above that layer is what's the question I need to ask of that authority, of C2PA? What questions can I even ask of C2PA? If I want to ask who takes the best photos, probably not a question I should be asking C2PA. If I want to know who's issuing IRA cards, probably not C2PA. If I want to ask who's a timestamp authority under C2PA, I'm going to ask you the question. But I want to know what question. But what we've learned on this, we're probably the 10th group right now that needs to say, okay, great. What does this thing mean? I think there's something there, but I don't concretely see me there. I want to work with you so you do concretely see you there because you are there. So that you
Okay.
can say, here's my governance, here's my overall approach, and here, tech folks, here's what you need to do to go wire this damn thing up.
Well, I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible. It seems easier than what we're going into. But I'm going to stand down because, you keep saying that, all the rest of the people on the call here are focusing on something else. And I don't.
Well, no, it's not that. It's just, Scott, we have an hour and we have 14 minutes left, and we have a major item that was raised by Alex a couple weeks back that we want to
Okay.
get to. That's all. It's just time.
Oh, I didn't even know. I thought we were in the midst of it, but you were talking
We
about
were
these things.
in the first issue. We were in the first one, which was this is the trust registry ID, authority ID, ecosystem ID being confused issue. The other issue was about claim ID, which we did talk about a little bit.
Okay.
You okay with that? But I'd love to
fine.
meet with you just to literally hammer through it.
Sure. I mean, it's not only this, but there are other, ecosystems that now it's getting hot here, and there's people wanting to understand how do we do all this,
Yep.
and they're gonna, unless this thing is out and being used,
Which
no one's gonna
again,
use it.
and this is the technical wiring part. What you have said, none of this, like the existing code, that's the existing protocol definition that works, that's there right this moment, can be used. It's using terms that are weird. Authority ID is ambiguous as hell for me. If I was on your team, you say, I want to put this TRQP on, they're like, what the hell is authority ID? And whereas if I said it's ecosystem ID, they'd understand. If I said trust registry ID, they'd understand. There is a subtle difference that we need to make sure we get the right one. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. We have just over 10 minutes left. Alex, you there still?
Okay. Yeah.
So we had a discussion on your issue here, the claim ID. And did you get a chance to look at the ticket? Yes, you did. Yes, that's right. You and I have been communicating on that.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, happy to chat it through. So I think firstly, I think Scott and you and Daryl are saying very similar things. So I think I think this is very simple. What you need to know when you're querying a trust registry is what is the sort of entity that you're querying, the entity ID, which we call, who asserted that this entity is trustworthy. That could be C2PA, that could be IRA. And also where is this claim stored? Where is this either trust registry or claim about this entity stored? Now, the reason I added claim ID is I don't think that every single trust registry is just going to be a list of entities with a URL. Some trust registries will be more complex than others. So some will just be, here's a list of all the trusted entities, and then what I would call the claim ID would just be the URL of where those entities are listed. But what we have unchecked is we don't have one trust registry URL. You can't just go to an ecosystem URL and find, like, you can, but it's more complex. What we have unchecked is one entity can make a claim about another entity. So entity X can make a claim about entity Y, which has some type of assertion to say, okay, like entity Y, you are accredited or authorized to issue credentials of this particular type. And that assertion is what gets queried, is like, is entity Y authorized by entity X for this particular scope? And then to actually decouple all of this, you need to know where that assertion or that claim is stored. So that could be stored in a simple list. There could be a list of all the claims about all the entities, or it could be fragmented across different lists. So or different locations. So when I suggested claim ID, it could be an optional field. I don't think every single trust registry or every single TRQP instance necessarily needs it. But for ourselves, we use did URLs for each claim about the entity. So we would need the protocol to be able to look up a particular claim to determine whether the entity is authorized, rather than just a simple list.
So let me, I'm trying to find a diagram that we had. Let me ask you a question. Do you expect, because remember, the protocol itself is merely a definition.
Yeah.
So the analogy, because we're talking HTTP, I like to use, because it simplifies things, it's a Swagger API. We actually do have a Swagger API that conforms with all of this here. There's the API layer where I'm asking a question of, we had a diagram, and this is where I'm frustrated we don't have the diagram sitting in this thing anymore. Actually, we do have a modified diagram. Let me throw this up here. So the endpoint itself is like, there's literally no code behind it. It's simply saying, does entity X have authorization Y under ecosystem Z? You could have a checked, like a native system where your system has implemented the API, and it goes and it says, hey, we are a credential anchored system. We know that this particular ecosystem, here's the authority, who, that's the issuer, but the holder, yes, entity X holds that credential issued by the controlling authority for ecosystem Z. You could do that right here, but the protocol won't do it for you. It's just simply defining what the API looks like. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So same thing
Yeah.
we looked at. And your example is really, one, it's awesomely appreciated because all of these, none of these are credential-based ecosystems right now. You've got an OIDF, which every OIDF implementation is different. X509 has a known structure. AD has a pattern, but they're largely different. You're defining, and this, I would love to show that example because it's a native credential example, but it doesn't change the protocol.
It changes, like, we couldn't use the existing request format to query our trust registry because there's nowhere in the existing protocol, and maybe I'm wrong, but when I was looking at the request format, you have authority ID, you have assertion ID, and you have entity ID.
Yep.
But that's basically saying what's the scope, who's the like governance authority ID, and who's the entity being queried about.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no locator. There's no where is this, like I understand what
Right.
you're saying, that we could build this into like a checked specific, like as a protocol, but like
Yep.
I think
Gotcha. So
yeah.
you're saying, because there's what I would call the API barrier.
Yeah.
This is the API barrier is the protocol. It's the under or behind is your system of record.
Yeah.
And this is the, in front is the interested developer. You
Yeah.
have the rights to issue that birth certificate in this ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we have a couple of things here. We have our triple. So we have entity, assertion, ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we have a dot context object, which right now has a minimum of time. Meaning when I say minimum, it's optional. This allows you to say, as of lunchtime last week, did you have that authority? Because we're looking into the past. Or just if you leave it blank, it's just now. There is
Yeah.
room here for any piece. Now, but I would also claim the following. My hunch is that if I have ecosystem ID, my hunch is it tells checked, or it tells the checked meta ecosystem enough to know who we are talking about. Meaning, if I pass you that ecosystem ID, you're going to know, oh, and then I thought your example was really, really helpful. For example, if we're looking at an agent facts ecosystem,
Mm-hmm.
how does your system know who's in charge of that, or is it completely out of your control?
So anyone can create their, like, unchecked right now, you could create your own ecosystem and sort of self-assert that this is a trusted ecosystem.
Okay.
That ecosystem will have a DID. So the ecosystem ID or the authority ID, actually, I mean,
Yep.
there's a difference between the two, but yeah, if you go back to
Agreed, but they
my
are one to one,
example,
but they're different. So I understand the difference. Yep. Did we lose you?
yeah, so if you go back to my example quickly, oh, is it my connection or?
What, I'm hearing you now. Are you hearing us?
Sorry, guys. Yeah, but I think my connection just had a bit of a jitter.
Okay.
Um,
You there?
yeah, I think it's better now. Um, yeah, I was just saying, okay, yeah, you've copied that. So you can see in my example, the authority ID is a DID of the person making the claim about the entity, and the entity is also identified with a DID. So both the authority ID and the entity ID are DIDs. The assertion ID is the scope, is like the entity that the entity holds. So is
Yep.
this entity authorized with these scopes?
Yep.
Now, if you know both of these DIDs, unchecked currently, that could be enough to make a trust decision, but the DID of the entity, the authority ID, could make like multiple claims about the entity ID.
Yep.
There could be 100 claims about the entity ID, some of
Totally.
which might have overlapping scopes.
But on a
So
particular
for me,
authority,
yeah,
but on a particular
yeah.
assertion, I know we have time booked next week to go into more detail. But on a particular assertion ID, though, you can get me an answer.
Potentially, you would have to. It would be. Um, like yes, yes is the short answer, but
Yep.
it's difficult is the long answer.
Right. So what I want to talk about is this is, folks, we're running out of time. I'm going to be visiting with Alex to do pretty much exactly what I was talking to Scott about doing and offering to help Scott with. What we and I'm kind of annoyed that we lost the preamble documentation. It might just be in the wiki. I just don't know where to look for it right now. That spoke about the scope of the TRQP. There's a scope of implementation above. What do I need to know to use the TRQP and where do I find it? And then underneath, what does my system of record need to do to support the protocol? What we're talking about here is both sides of that. And having concrete examples of C2PA and one or two of the checked ecosystem, I think is going to help us a ton with exposing that. I would throw the following bug in your ear, Alex, that I've lost our meeting notes. Trying to find our meeting notes. Nope. Hopefully that's it. This is the last week's meeting notes. What Alex and I are going to be talking about goes beyond what else is a system going to likely need, but we don't know for sure. So putting this in the protocol doesn't make any sense right now. And it may actually be its own sort of a metadata protocol, which is, hey, I have an entity. What other rights does it have? In your ecosystem, hey, this one's able to do, in our example, this one's able to do agent facts. is one that we talked about, agent fax credential. But it's also able to do X, Y, and Z. It's be able to do the following things. But we'll cover that off as a working example. Does that make sense, Alex?
Yeah, I think, yeah, let's save this for our chat next week as well. We'll go into
Awesome.
more detail there.
I'm looking forward to it, and thank you folks for putting up with me jumping around on a bunch of topics, because I think this is going to help. The concrete examples are what helps drive clarity using examples, but also helps remove the confusion, which this authority ID usage, which actually we've now duplicated your usage of authority ID, Alex, caused some of that confusion, which is helping. Unfortunately, I need to
Awesome.
run.
All right, cheers, Daryl. Thanks,
Thanks, folks.
guys.
Thanks all.
Bye-bye.
Oh.